dash, and then I do like the I'm choking motion. So she calls 911, and we're in our local town. And 911 and the emergency room at the hospital are not in sync because there's no time to wait for the ambulance because I literally cannot breathe and I'm starting to turn colors. My daughter's in the back seat and she's 3, has no idea what's going on. So we pull up to the emergency room and nobody is there waiting to help us. It took him 3 minutes to get a wheelchair out. And then whoever they had wheel me up to the maternity ward, I guess assumed I was just in labor and being dramatic because they walked so slow. Like nobody realized it was an emergency. And they're like, oh, we can't touch you. We can't deal with you until you sign all these papers. But that was just crap. I'm sorry. My mother-in-law just happened to know a very high-working nurse at our particular hospital. And when this nurse comes around, like, stuff gets done. Like, so she called her to see if she was at work, and she came down to the maternity ward. And all the nurses that were in my room, basically assuming I was being dramatic, being in labor at 29 weeks, like, they just snapped. Jumped into action and actually were doing what they were supposed to do while we waited for my doctor to show up. He got there in 5 minutes because my heartbeat had synced with the baby's and it was dropping. It was dropping very low and they couldn't figure out why my heartbeat was dropping. They couldn't figure out what exactly was going on. So as soon as my doctor gets there, he takes one look at the ultrasound because the nurse is kind of doing the scan, and he's like, Helen, we've got to get you in for an emergency C-section right now to save you and the baby. And my husband wasn't even there yet. Like he lived like he worked 30 minutes away. I don't know how he got to the hospital in 15 minutes, but he did without a ticket, so that was awesome. But they had to wait for our local hospital doesn't have a 24/7 anesthesiologist. So they couldn't even put me under until the anesthesiologist got there. And he was 12 minutes away from the time my doctor said I needed a C-section. And so I'm laying in the bed and the nurse is trying to calm me. Nobody else was allowed in the room until my husband got there. And nobody even changed clothes yet. They're just like, here it goes. And they put the mask on me. And by then, I'm basically hyperventilating because I have no control over the situation. And I hear my doctor say, is she under yet? We have to go now. And that was the last thing I remember. Then when I wake up, maybe an hour later, I probably come to, I see my husband sitting next to me, and he's not holding a baby. And I just told him, I was like, she didn't make it, did she? And then he just starts crying. I found out later that night that they worked on her for 43 minutes. And the helicopter was 5 minutes away before they called it. Her little heart just stopped beating. So because I did have an emergency C-section, I had to stay in the hospital for 3 days. Thankfully, they didn't make me stay in the maternity ward. They rolled me up to a different floor, which is like surgery recovery. And they put the butterfly on my door. And that night, my room's crowded by that time because I have family come in, and the nurses were introducing themselves as to who was going to take care of me. My daughter was someone came to take my daughter. My sister's grandparents came, took her for hamburgers. That's one thing she remembers about that day being the positive, is she got to have hamburgers. But they put my girls in a little basket, and they let them stay in my room overnight because they had washed them and they had dressed them and they had swaddled them up real good. And one of my biggest regrets is I didn't look at my baby's faces, because my own family told me I didn't want to remember them that way. So I didn't have any pictures of me holding them. And at first I didn't want the hospital photographer to take photos of them, but bless her heart, she did anyway, and those are my most treasured possessions. Because there's so many photos of the girls in different outfits, and we got to keep all the outfits that the photographer posed the girls in the blankets. So
Well, you've done a remarkable job telling your story, and I know everyone is just absolutely moved. And I've told you this many times when we've talked, that your strength and your input and how you carry yourself in our group and remind us to be mindful of everyone is incredible. And I'm just so happy you shared today. And I'm not cutting you off. I'm just letting you know that right now, I think you have everyone in this room so moved by your story. And I'm so proud of you for doing this. So absolutely proud. Thank you. Sorry.
I really didn't think I was going to get through that much, so.
You've done an incredible job, and I think, honestly, like I said, your story is one that's so powerful and it needs to be told. And some of the things that you said are really some of the things that motivated us to put on this webinar as well, and how we talk to people and communities. And I think one of the biggest things is right now you have an audience, it's a small audience, but tell us what you want us to know about losing a twin and losing twins, and what we as a community can do to support you and families like yours.
Well, I guess because our twins were at specific gestation that we knew what gender they were, they had names. And that's the biggest thing, is I don't share their names very often because I have to be careful about who I share my story with. Because shortly after we lost the girls, my story was used for somebody else's gain. And so that's why I'm kind of quiet in the group sometimes until I see more people, the names more frequently, as commenters, like, okay, I can trust these people, But saying their names, because it's still hard for me to say their names out loud, even when I'm trying to honor them. And I know not everybody is the type of person who would call somebody else out if they catch somebody else being insensitive. But I wanted to share two of the really negative things that were said to me.
Yeah.
this phrase was said to me like 2 weeks after we lost Alice, and I was still obviously pregnant. But somebody was like, "Oh, well, I'm sorry for your loss, but at least you still have one baby, right?" And she patted me on the back and walked away. And I'm pretty sure I died that day, because I'm just like, is that really what people say? And she was so sincere in her tone of voice that I probably should have punched her in the face, but I'm not that type of person. Especially not while I'm pregnant. I'm not that type of person, I guess.
It's okay. You've got a room full of alibis. You can go back and do it in your head.
And so one of the second thing is, after we had lost, our girl, which happened to be on February 2nd, which here in the United States is Groundhog Day. So if anyone's seen that movie, it's almost like reliving the same day over and over again. And I actually struggled with that for like 2 years, reliving the same day over and over again. And the outcome didn't change. But talking about it, one person said, well, 2 babies would have been really hard in your situation anyway, because at the time my husband and I were living with my parents, with our daughter. And so, adding 2 more babies into an already crammed household just wouldn't have been good for anybody.